All right. Well, I guess this is David and James Make a Podcast, and we're really trying.
Yeah, we still have a website domain thingy.
Yeah. What's the website? Give us a plug right away, James.
I don't know, something.com.
Was it? Did we even go with the
No,
.com?
I think it was .rocks.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, we didn't.
I think it was like Dave and James Rock or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're not .com worthy yet. I mean,
Right.
come on, we're just peons making our first ever podcast.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we should ever be .com worthy. It's kind of old school. It's like the 90s bubble.
So what's cool these days? You're the computer guy.
.XXX, you know.
.XXX? David and James .XXX. I thought this was going to be a family-friendly show. It is not.
What?
Do we need to get naked now?
Right. I'm not sure I'm going there yet.
No, not yet. Yeah. This is the first episode. You don't want to go there.
Got at least
right
the third
away.
or fourth, right?
Yeah.
It's gotta ease into that relationship.
Right. We'll see. By, like you said, 3 or 4, maybe 5. You know, we'll have some wine.
Don't want to be easy.
No. Yeah. You don't want to be like, yeah, exactly. Too available.
Right? You gotta make it look like you have other options out there. Yeah.
Although I am like perplexed at the sort of weirdness people have with nudity.
Right.
That was like, I saw this. You probably never have heard of her, but Camila Cabello. Do you know who that is? So she's a pop star.
Okay.
And she recently had a nip slip on the BBC or whatever. And she was doing an internet Ask Me Anything. And somebody asked her, you know, like something about the nip slip. And she says, I don't care. She says, I couldn't care less about it. In fact, she said that she has nip slipped in public on purpose before.
There you go.
And, you know, she brought up an argument that's been brought up by many people. How come it's cool for guys to have their nipples out and not me? And then she started going on this thing. She's like, ladies, have you ever been topless in the ocean? She said, it feels so freaking good, she says, and I'm upset that they've taken that from us. So I agree.
Right.
Free the nip.
See, the thing about it is, though, is the more you see it, the less charged you get from it.
Yes, I think if you're around it all the time, it just becomes normal.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with being naked. I mean, we all have, you know, boobs or dicks, man. Like, we do. We have them. It's fine. It's not a big deal.
Right.
I don't understand what everybody's hang-up is.
Well, the reason why it's something that we don't show is because we've been taught in our society that it is something you don't show. If we lived in a society that was completely nude, it would be nothing. Because it's just something that's always been there, and you wouldn't even look at it. In fact, you would look at people who were clothed and think, that's weird.
Do you think wearing clothes is one of the first lies we tell? Because it's almost hiding.
Pretty young.
It's almost hiding who you are. People are more honest when they're naked.
Oh, I would believe that 100%.
For whatever reason that is, I don't know what it is about being nude that makes you be honest.
What else you got to hide? I mean,
well, I guess, right. So for some reason, like, wearing clothing is like, I don't know, on the way to deceiving others. Now, albeit, I just want people to have a choice. Not that I just would be naked all the time, because I'm not trying to, you know, catch my ding-a-ling on a twig while I'm going through the woods. All right, I'm wearing that for protection.
Or poison ivy.
Oh yeah, you know. So and that'd be the other thing. I just think the option of clothes, like, if you want to, fine, that's great, but you shouldn't, you know, free the nip. The whole point of this is free the nip. You should be allowed to be naked if you want. And then it's like, all right, Moody, why don't you go to those, you know, nudist colonies? Because for some reason it seems like it's trying too hard. I'm all for that. That's fine if that's how people want to do it. But to, like, go to this little kumbaya in the woods where everybody's nude, it's just too cutesy for me, James. It's too cutesy for me.
For me, I think it feels a little too communal, and I believe it's probably just a societal box that I've managed to put myself in, is that I feel it's, you know, it's too communal for me. But like my uncle, he lives out in the desert in the winter, and they had a nudist couple kind of moved in on the desert next to him, and they came over and they were polite about it, and they asked, you know, hey, we just want to let you know we're nudists. You know, is this going to be okay? And he just said, as long as it's okay that I stare at you, it'll be perfectly fine. And they're like, yeah, we don't care. And so they actually lived together right across the desert from each other for a long time. Had good relationship, shared sugar, you know. And so, I mean, I don't believe it has to be something that's odd. Now, I'd hate to have to go through high school butt naked, because that'd be a rough time in life, but...
And again, like, you know, not saying that you have to be naked, but just if you want to be at a certain point in time, and to go to your communal comment, I agree, it's almost like forced. Then it's like I don't want to just go with somewhere with the intention of being nude. Right. Just if I'm on a beach somewhere and I'm hot and I want to be nude because it's hot and that's what I would naturally be. That's what I want to do. I just want options. All right, this is America. I believe in options. If you don't want to wear clothes, don't wear clothes.
Right. And if you don't like where somebody is naked, don't stand by them. That's my issue is it's just like when they first started doing the whole can't smoke in like the planet. You know, I had issues with that. I've never been a smoker. I don't really care to smoke. I don't even like cigarette smoke. But the truth is I feel it should be everyone's choice. I mean, if we go to a restaurant, it should be the restaurant owner's choice whether he allows it. My choice whether or not I go there. Walking down the streets where we both pay taxes, well, if I don't like the fact that you're smoking, I'll stand on a different part of the street. I don't have to stand right next to you if I don't like it. But yet, you know, we build these conformist agendas where all of a sudden we're forced to either do or don't do something. Some of them are like good in our opinion, some of them are bad, but I still think it's conformist in nature. Again, if I don't want to see you naked, I don't necessarily have to look at you. I mean, it's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, people seem to get hung up on having to have others live a certain way, you know, and until you're like, you know, smoking a cigarette for me, I mean, you're only harming yourself.
Right. The argument gets made though in cases like that it's because it's available and the advertising is so good it forces me into it, but I don't believe that. It's some of us have stronger willpower. I mean, I did methamphetamine for a lot of years at levels way beyond what is good for the body. But at the same time, I never had anybody force it. Yeah, it was really good stuff. It allowed me to do a lot of work. I enjoyed it. I really never had very many moments of my life of doing methamphetamine that I didn't like. I mean, it was very detrimental to my health, to my mental state, to everything. But at the same time, I never pushed it on anyone else. And I never, you know, felt it pushed on me ever. And so, you know, just because methamphetamine is available doesn't require me to use it, even if it is something that's enjoyable to use it. And even beyond that, I don't have to abuse it, and making it available or even making it enticingly available doesn't mean I have to abuse it. I mean, there are a lot of people out there, even in our government officials, that use methamphetamine most of the time to a level that allows them to be functional, and they're, you know, not all cracked out. But
Rob Ford did crack, and he got reelected mayor in Toronto.
So would you say that's wrong?
What I've always said is that whatever you do to you that's only affecting you is your business. That's my point of view. Now, drugs have some serious consequences, but I think people get afraid of legal ramifications that sometimes they don't reach out.
The truth is, though, is historically we've seen, like in places like Amsterdam and stuff like that, where drugs are legal, the actual abuse rate is much less than it is in places where it's illegal.
Well, and some could argue that in those instances, people get to bear witness to the worst of what those drugs can do. I mean, if you see someone real strung up on, you know, methamphetamines or really any of the hardcore stuff, it doesn't really make you want to do it.
Right.
So you see those examples, and sometimes you'd be like, man, I don't want to be like that. And if you stop prosecuting so much for what you're doing to yourself crimes, and then just try to get people help and education, I think could go a long way, and not like trying to come up from like, you know, on like this soapbox where you're preaching to people, but just explaining like, hey, if you do this, like this is what happens to you, you know. But I do now, if you come and rip the copper out of my walls to fund your habit, now we can prosecute you. But if you're just shooting up in your basement, I don't need to know that, or, you know, come prosecute you for that.
But if you think about, if we take the availability of, say, drugs that do promote things like robbery and burglary and things like that, if we take those drugs and make them more available, I don't need to rip the copper out of your house when I'm a crackhead, because I can just go to the nearest place and get my dose and, you know, move on. Because
no, you're not suggesting like selling methamphetamines at like Walgreens or something.
Well, so my thought is on that is, so if we have regulation around it, not necessarily regulation that inhibits my ability to access it, but maybe makes me go through someone who can help monitor my usage. Like, for instance, this whole war on opiates issue. So the thing about it is it's not because doctors prescribe opiates that people become addicted and abuse them. I mean, the reason why they become abused is because people lack willpower, things like that.
Well, and then some substances just are addictive.
Right. Well, I mean, the truth of it is caffeine is one of the most widely abused substances on the planet. You know, we all have our drug of choice, but it doesn't mean that we all need to abuse it. And so I think if we had some sort of regulation, like for instance, going to the doctor, like if I couldn't just buy methamphetamine, say at, the gas station, but I could go to a doctor, and that doctor, without fear of, being blackballed by the medical society, could, within reason, prescribe that. See, and I think that's where a lot of stuff comes in, is in places where it becomes more taboo, it's more secretive. People tend to get more into a position where they are abusing something. Now, if I lived in a society where the fact that I do methamphetamine was open and I felt no shame from it whatsoever, if there's, people wouldn't have a problem coming up to me and saying, hey, man, I think you're maybe hitting that a little bit hard. I mean, you look at alcohol. I mean, when someone's, drinking heavily, I mean, generally they're not hiding the fact that they're drinking alcohol. And if
celebrated often.
Right. But at the same time, people abuse it heavily, but people don't feel ashamed to even mention to someone else, like, hey, man, you've been hitting it pretty hard lately. Is everything all right?
Well, I think that happens, though. I mean, you've already got Alcoholics Anonymous, and I know interventions and stuff happen.
But the truth is, if somebody wants to abuse a substance, you aren't going to do anything to stop it. So do we want to create more of an environment where it's being cooked in a meth lab, where people are being killed and exploited and things like that? Even this heroin epidemic. I mean, so we're talking about using heroin, and most of the deaths that are happening is because they're being laced with fentanyl. Well, if we had a more legitimate source of getting heroin freely, whether abused or not, we would help make it pure, or at least more monitored and safe and regulated, so that if I am having a problem with it, it won't end in my death. It may end in my continual abuse of it, but at least as long as I'm not dead, I still have the opportunity of somehow getting help from that. Where if someday I shoot up with a fentanyl-laced heroin and I'm dead, there's no help after that.
Well, right. I mean, in the black market, right, things get cut with all sorts of things, and it ends up very bad for a lot of people.
I mean, do we want to take the knowledge from, and some of them, I'm not discrediting their intelligence, but I mean, somebody who's been awake for a month and a half, not without sleep, because they are abusing the drug, we want to get the advice from them? Or do we want to have, vetted and tenured scientific process into these substances to help figure out how can we, make it available for people who need it, as well as recreational use, but limit the amount of casualties from it?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues, bottom line, is that there's this mentality that if you're not like sober or like not doing anything other than drinking, for some reason drinking is allowed and okay.
Pastime.
But it's like, if you're not sober, there's something wrong.
I mean, we're really starting to see a world where marijuana is starting to open up into mainstream, where it's not considered that big, you're a pothead. It's, we're seeing people start to realize that that's not this big taboo gateway substance that everybody seemed to think it was back in the 80s and 90s,
Oh, that slippery slope thing, it's because they'll point to, like, almost anybody who's done anything harder has smoked marijuana at some point in their life. They'll be like, well, that's how everybody starts. But again, part of it could be, if it's illegal and you're going to smoke it, how are you going to get it? Well, you got to get it through illegal means. So you got to do it. And then when you get things through illegal means, you meet interesting people. Right. And sometimes the people that you meet are pretty shady, right, and they don't have your best interest in mind. A rotten apple corrupts. But if it was, legal and up front, you don't meet those type of people, and you don't sometimes get pulled into environments that aren't going to be good for you. Right.
Yeah, it definitely increases the safety factor of even the moment of being there,
Well, yeah, I mean, as soon as you make anything illegal, like, again, like, I think you touched on something interesting. Like, I'm not so sure. I am sure. Like, I don't think like you know heroin should just be available at your downtown corner. But I do believe that in the medical world, in the doctor world, that we should open up more things for people dealing with mental issues. I think there's a lot of good that can help all these people out there with problems. You know.
Well, like I had a cousin. He's diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, and you know he could get pretty weird. But the thing that was interesting about it is you know, I mean, you know, my methamphetamine use was back in the 90s, but when he would do methamphetamine, he would become a completely I guess quote unquote normal person. You wouldn't even think it was the same person, and it was methamphetamine, yet somehow there was something about the chemical processes in his brain that helped clear his head. And so rather than just, you know, write something off, it's, you know, I agree. It definitely should be more open to study and not just so much taboo.
Right. And to even have the idea that these other things might help you, like, shouldn't be frowned on, you know, like just exploring the idea that maybe doing something else can help me should be encouraged, because we should try to find more and more ways to help. So interesting discussion, to say the least. Well, what do you think? I think that's a pretty good first podcast.
Yeah.
David and James talking about nudity and drugs.
Yeah.